Welcome to the art therapy intervention video on mystery bags. I'm Dawn Olson. I'm a registered clinical counselor and an art therapist. Mystery bags are marvelous. They are a lot of fun. Think back to when you were a child and went and grabbed a mystery bag of candy from the candy store. It's so fun having something that where you don't know what's inside, and in this case where you get to use these unexpected materials in unexpected ways. So the mystery bag intervention requires a number of objects, obviously. Here is my mystery bag that I'm going to be working with today as I talk to you about doing this art therapy intervention with your population. And actually, I think this intervention can work for really people of all ages, and I have used it with children as young as 6 through to people who are old as well. So a great intervention all around. And of course you will think about ways to adapt the contents of the bag to make it suitable for various populations. For instance, when I'm using it with teens who might be self-harming, then I don't put in objects with which they could cut themselves. And I control if I do put in things like scissors or a sewing needle, because maybe that's one of the things they can use to make their artwork. I make sure that it's really controlled so that I have all of those things back before the end of the session, and that I'm keeping an eye out for their use of it. So mystery bags require supplies, and it's always a good idea to try out the intervention for yourself before actually doing it with your clients. So I'm inviting you now to go and fetch a bunch of different objects, and it really can be anything at all. Do not be looking necessarily for things that have high aesthetic value or that you necessarily think of as art objects, although you could have some of those as well. What you want is a mix of things. So for you right now to do this intervention, I'd say gather about maybe 12 different things. So go get a label from a box, maybe snip off a label from a piece of clothing, get a bottle cap that you have sitting out in your recycling box, get the front cover of your box of Kraft Dinner, rip out a couple of pages from a magazine, maybe that have an animal figure in one of them and maybe a human figure in another. Get things like toothpicks, a Band-Aid, what else could you use? Weird plastic stuff maybe from your hardware odds and ends drawer. So maybe some bolts, rubber bands. So really just ephemera, weird and wonderful stuff. And include things that you find ugly. It's amazing what you can do with things that you find ugly and how your feelings might change about them as you use them in creative ways, and how perfect they might be for a particular use that you didn't expect to have. So I have a list here of supplies that are just supply ideas. They can be all sorts of things. I've got some of the things that I mentioned here, and other things as well. So go and get your things and come on back. You'll need also a pair of scissors and a glue stick as well, and a piece of paper for attaching your collage to, because you will be making a collage. With the mystery bag activity, you can present the activity at different levels of risk and difficulty. So I've articulated 4 different levels here, but you could think of more, or you could condense them to fewer if you wished. There's nothing set in stone about these levels. So at level 1, which would be the lowest level of risk and difficulty, I would offer that there can be fair trades between people. So as long as both people are feeling good about the trade, that's a fair trade. With children particularly, maybe sometimes with teens, you'd need to be watchful that somebody wasn't taking advantage of somebody else, so that Peter, for instance, is trading 1 marble for 9 of Thomas's toy trains or something, or whatever happens to be in his bag. Another variant for level 1 would be having the trading boat. So this trading boat is a little vessel that can be used either in a planned way, or it can be used as an emergency vessel. So at level 1, you would be using it probably in a planned way, letting the group know that halfway through the intervention halfway through the collage building, you'll bring out the trading boat, and at that point they can trade one of their items for one of the items that are in the boat. If you were to use it in an emergency kind of way, then you would be operating at a level where you didn't intend to bring out the trading boat, but you saw that an individual in the group would actually benefit from being able to trade one of their items for something else that might suit them better or be inspiring for them or just to help them along in their process. And if you did that, you would need to make sure that you did offer the same opportunity to everybody in the group. Groups always are symbolic of the family, and there can be sibling rivalry even among non-related people in your various client groups. So you want to be watching for that and make sure that you are operating as a fair parent to the group. The final variant for level 1 is that you would give the directive that they can use some or all of the materials. You may want to post these sort of rules and the guidelines so that people can refer to them. It's easy to forget what the rules of the game are. At the next level, so we're stepping up in level of difficulty and risk. At the next level, level 2, again we have fair trades being allowed, but now we have no extra material. So in this scenario, your intention is not to bring out the trading boat, but rather to bring it if it's necessary as an emergency. And again, they can use some or all of the materials. Moving a step up again toward increasing the level of difficulty and risk. Now we're saying no trading, no extra materials. Again, it's not your intention to use the trading boat, but you might if it was needed, if it's therapeutically needed. And they can use some or all of the materials. Moving up to the highest level, level 4, there is no trading, there is no extra materials. Again, you could use this in an emergency. And they can use only all of the materials. So they need to find some way to incorporate everything that they have found in their surprise bag. So you will assess with each group that you do what level of difficulty the group can tolerate and will benefit from. And that is a clinical decision that you make. I would say, for example, if it's a bunch of art therapists who are doing the intervention, then you could go as high as level 4. Level 3 would be fine too. But people who are experienced at doing art might like the challenge of no trading, no extra materials, and using all of the materials. But for other people who maybe have difficulty problem solving, maybe they're actually highly self-conscious, so using some materials that they don't like would make them feel quite uncomfortable. You might want to take the risk of the level of risk and difficulty down a couple of notches. So mystery bags can be themed. I just want to add that you can make them kind of random, as I suggested, and I think random is great. However, you may want to be working your mystery bag into a seasonal theme, so into the seasons maybe. Maybe you want to make fall bags for everybody, or summer bags, or maybe it's nearing Halloween or some holiday that the group celebrates. So you could add objects that relate to that theme or colors. So if it's Halloween, maybe you put in more items that are orange and black. The therapeutic value of this exercise, I think it has all kinds of therapeutic benefit that happens for all different reasons, and I'll speak to a few of those. But this idea of limiting and pre-selecting the art supplies, strangely, I think it's almost paradoxical, helps to create emotional safety and lower art anxiety. I know that I had one teen who said something to the effect of, well, it's just what was given to me, so I'm not responsible. She felt totally free to make whatever art product came out of this because constraints had been applied and materials had been given, which she had no control of. So it was very freeing for her. And as I speak of that, I think of the sort of the existential tension that is noted between freedom and structure, that actually when we are given structure, it is actually quite freeing for us. The intervention also does level the playing field. Often in a group you will have some clients who are proficient at art, other people who are less experienced, some people who have no experience, and others maybe who are full of art anxiety. But when you give a bag of these objects, which doesn't necessarily have to include drawing, although I've included a couple of drawing tools in there, it kind of starts everybody at the same level. There's no specific art skill that relates to putting these pieces together. No particular skill that relates to that. And so it kind of puts everybody at the same starting point, which is relieving for people who have less experience or maybe have art anxiety. Therapeutically beneficial also in that it definitely is a problem-solving activity. And especially, I'm thinking about children who have maybe some serious problems in their family life, or situational problems, or maybe limitations. This is a problem-solving activity that doesn't force them to directly confront those things, but can help them to build the skill of approaching problems creatively. So it helps them to practice at a safe remove, meeting challenges that are problematic for them, and finding creative ways to work with their own realities. And that said, when they do achieve something with this bag of materials that's a new completed art product, it feels very satisfying, and it can enhance their sense of self-efficacy and their sense of confidence and pride. I know that, I think the last time I did this in a psychiatric hospital, I had reports back from the teen unit that they basically all came running back just so full of pride for the things that they had created. The intervention can also provide a lot of value just in terms of therapeutic moments. I know I had one participant who, when it came time to share at the end of the group, said that, I'm really sorry, but I'm terrible at this. I'm no good at art because I always start it from a cognitive place, and I know that's not what you're supposed to do. And that was a really great opportunity for me to say, actually, starting from a cognitive place is a perfectly valid starting point for an artist, and many artists start at the concept and build from there. There are just so many different entry points for beginning a work of art. And I think I'm hoping that was really helpful for her to kind of challenge that thought that she had, and to realize that her own way of doing it is perfectly okay, perfectly valid, and is part of who she is. Another therapeutic benefit is that it can provide a lot of learning about ourselves. As in any art therapy activity, or maybe even any art activity, there is sometimes, I think, a part of ourselves that observes ourselves through the process and learns, it can objectively see what we're doing, and has us reflecting on how we're approaching things, maybe what we're avoiding, maybe particular themes that come up for us. Again, there I go, trying to make that nose on my dog absolutely perfect, and I'm losing sight of the whole thing, and I'm kind of losing sight of some of the joy of the spontaneity of art making that I'm really striving to create that capacity in myself to enjoy it in a freer way. I had one teen who made her artwork, and then she said, oh my gosh, that's my anxiety. So it was a moment where she saw herself reflected in her art, and maybe it was a moment of a deepening acceptance of the fact that she does struggle with anxiety, and that it is quite a force in her life. And of course we know that accepting where we are is always the first step toward making change. That if we don't see or accept what it is that we're struggling with, then we can't move on to doing something about it and to making it different. A fifth point in terms of a therapeutic benefit is that, and this is from an art therapist's perspective and maybe an artist's perspective, that art and creativity are ways of being and activities that can really magnify our spirit. They bring us joy, even hope, and often a larger sense of our own capacity. I know that when I'm exposed to any kind of art that moves me, that says something to me, that I do walk away feeling kind of more hopeful about the world. I feel somehow more capacity in myself. I feel more inclined to take risks and do something creative myself. So I find that it has tremendous therapeutic benefit in that way, and that people are getting an experience of being creative, and that is enlarging for them, and activating, and helps them to think about new ways and innovative ways that they can maybe approach some of the problems in their life, but also probably encourages them to expose themselves to art generally, which is also, we know, really good for people's mental health. And And at a very fundamental level, I think the therapeutic benefit of this activity too, like many art therapy activities should be, is that it just creates positive emotion, that there's so many elements of delight in the playfulness of it, in the surprise and the anticipation of opening your bag, that just creates positive emotion. So if you're working with people who are anxious or who are depressed, it can be really satisfying and special for them to experience positive emotion at all. As a sixth therapeutic benefit, it creates the possibility of, as I mentioned earlier too, of using art as a kind of as a coping tool, or even just as a hobby, because it's soothing, it brings pleasure, it brings learning, if not about how to do the art, then about yourself as you look at the art you've made, or reflect on yourself and observe yourself through the process. And it can also contribute to meaning making. We can actually learn about ourselves, learn about our situations, and sometimes even our art will inform us about ourselves and help us see things in a new way that actually contributes to our understanding of ourselves, and even of our relationships, and sometimes of the world and of people. So now is the time for me to maybe to open up my bag and to discover what's inside. I haven't done this before, but I went outside my little studio this morning and grabbed a leaf and stapled it on, because I think nature is healing, and even just seeing a leaf and feeling a leaf can be very nourishing for people. We know that nature actually plays a big part in people's mental health, so I thought that would be kind of fun. It makes it a even more appealing little bag, and it's an object that they could also use in their collage. So there's my first little gift to myself, is my leaf. And you can use just a plain brown paper bag. I even actually feel slightly inclined to use a brown paper bag more than a colorful bag. I like things that are kind of dull and simple and ordinary. I think they can be more evocative and contribute somehow to a richer piece if it's not something that's shiny or particularly standoutish. But this is fun too. So we'll see what I have in my bag. So I've got some roving, a pair of scissors, and this is an item where you could change the level of risk as well. You could decide that, no, I'm not going to put scissors in, that actually I'll let people tear what they're doing. If you had people who are particularly anxious, actually, and quite perfectionistic, especially perfectionism, I'd leave the scissors out and just let them tear. Then that's it's releasing for them, because they can't be precise, so that it lets them off the hook. And I have a glue stick, so that's how I will probably attach things. I knew about a couple of these things, but actually I didn't remember them all, so some of these things are surprising to me, because I built this bag a little while ago. I've got a lot of objects. I've got some white plasticine, and I do include, I like to include a tactile object. We know from research that having people have something that's tactile, something that they really have to manipulate, and especially that they can manipulate in a repeated and rhythmic way, is healing for the brain, especially around experiences of trauma. So I like to include something that they really have to work with their hands and engage with in a tactile way for that reason. This might be more effective in a color, because I've got white on white here, so choosing something like blue or any color that would stand out against the white is maybe a better choice if you're working on white paper. So all kinds of ephemera. You don't need to have this much stuff, I think, in a bag, but I've got a lot of choices here. So I may just limit this a little bit. I think I've actually got a bit too much here. I'll put those plastic bits in there. So you can see odd things like this little curtain hanger. This is kind of more fancy art supply washi tape. All kinds of things. And this is not a prescription. Again, using stuff that that you find maybe at your recycling center, that you accumulate around the house, or from your recycling or your garage or your odds and ends drawer, is just fine. So I'm facing my materials and I need to think about how I'm going to put these together, and I think I'm going to do it super quickly so that you can maybe get a sense of how these materials could be used. I love this fellow. I always wanted to be a cowboy, either that or a race car driver. So here I go, I get to be a cowboy for a moment. There's my cowboy. I looked at this item and I don't like this item so much, which reminds me that you might think about with different groups how you present the materials to your group. For some groups you might just tell them to open up their bag and to use the materials in whatever way they wish. And with if we're using the level 3 where they're using some or all of the materials, they can decide which ones they use, which ones they don't, and it's very interesting to see what people do. So I really don't like this stack of coffee cups that much. So what am I going to do? Am I going to force myself to use it and to use it as it is? Am I going to maybe reverse it and use the other side? Am I going to tear it up and create something new, maybe a nest out of it? And yeah, interesting just to see how it is that I solve problems, how it is I face things that are uncomfortable for myself, what I do with them. Do I force it in? Do I reinvent it? Do I put it aside and not deal with it? So that it'll be teaching me a lot about myself. And that said, maybe it's just teaching me about myself in this moment. Maybe I've had a terrible morning, and I would usually try to find a way to be creative with this, but I've had a terrible morning and I'm going to put it aside and I'm going to make this more about kind of relaxing and soothing myself. So there is a lot of metaphor that happens for people, I think, when they choose their things, and that may become part of the sharing at the end of the group where they may or may not say some things about that. So I'm more inclined to use this side of it. I like this reflective face on this person, and I'm going to have her maybe kind of looking at this guy here. She doesn't look totally, I'm not sure if she's totally happy with him. She looks a bit pensive. Now, is she dreaming about him, or is she feeling unhappy about him in some way? So I'm going to put her down. Maybe basically what I'm probably starting to do is create a bit of a story here. And I think I saw an arrow, so I'm going to further suggest that she's looking at this fellow here by using the arrow. I don't really know where this is going. This is actually one of the delights of this bag. And sometimes I do encourage people. They tend to put a lot of pressure on themselves to kind of think about what the whole thing's going to be right away. And I sometimes just gently suggest choose one thing that you like and put it on the paper. Having something down provides a starting point. And that's the way that many artists actually work, is to create a starting point, or to use a constraint so they have something to bounce their ideas off of. Now I also have this little hand. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that. I also saw these asparagus, and what I thought of for that was I want to make it into grass. So the horse is running through some of the grass. I was going to say, additionally, with some groups, you may want to say to them that there are a number of objects in your bag, and to give them a little bit of guidance about it, to let them know that you can use all or some of these materials. You can reinvent some of your pieces. It's fine to tear something up if you want to reinvent it. If you don't like it, isn't fine. Maybe you get a human figure and you don't like it. You can cut it into pieces to make something else, or you can turn it upside down and turn the body into a tree. So to give people permission to do that. And it depends. It depends what you say. Often just giving a wide open invitation. It's interesting to see what people do and what their process is. And you'll be as people are working, you'll be observing the group, maybe reminding them that fair trade is an option, and often there gets to be a lot of exchanging, and that becomes an important part of the therapeutic benefit as well, is the exchange that happens and the bit of community that starts getting built between people. So, oh, and speaking of community, I have a word here that says community. What am I going to do? I think I might use this as a tree. So maybe I'll put that in as a kind of tree over there. It's not really sticking, but that's fine. I could use my washi tape if I wanted for that, which is over here. And maybe I make it into something kind of fantastical, I'm just thinking. Maybe it becomes a flower or something. I don't know. And it doesn't matter. I'm making it up as I go. And people will work in very different ways. Some people will feel quite free to make something that's unplanned and weird and that doesn't particularly have cohesion or logic to it. And other people will be slower and more deliberate and constrained about what they're doing. And these are different approaches to art making, which are just fine. And what else am I going to do? I think I'm going to put this one down. And I think I might be getting close to an end. Oh, I had a pencil that was part of my thing, so I'm going to use that to spell a word. Y. So, and I think I'm going to use my Band-Aid. I'm going to cut it in two. Maybe I should have cut it before I opened it, but this will do. Start. I'm going to, actually I've got a bit of a story happening here. I'm going to represent her heart here, I think. I was going to fill it with red, but I won't. I'm going to put a Band-Aid across her heart, I think. And what else might be fun? I think I'll leave it at that. So, this will lead next to when people are finished. You'll want to give them a heads up, as you always do with any art therapy intervention. You'll want to give them a heads up, say when there's about 10 minutes left before they are completing their work. And then a few minutes before, let them know that there are 2 or 3 minutes left, and then call time. You can let people know, and you can do this at the onset of the intervention if you like. Let them know that they may or may not have time to completely finish their collage today, depends on your time constraints, but that they may take the leftover materials, perhaps accepting certain ones like the glue stick, maybe the washi tape and the scissors. Let them know what they can take with them, that they can take away in their paper bag if they wanted to take those materials and finish it off at another time. Hopefully most people, if not everybody, has finished their collage, but letting them know in advance that they can do that creates a sense of security and maybe takes a little of the time pressure off of people. So this is done. So what I would do with the person who finishes first is actually give them some journaling questions. And the journaling questions are the following. What were some of your thoughts and feelings when you got your mystery bag and opened it up? What materials did you like the most, the least? Did your feelings about these things change or stay the same throughout the course of building your collage? What was interesting or surprising to you about doing this activity? If your collage was a scene in a story, what was happening before, during, and after it? Think of a simple title for your collage and write it down along with your name and the date. So, I'm going to answer some of these questions. What were my thoughts and feelings when I got my mystery bag and opened it up? I was kind of excited about it, but also a bit nervous. I was wondering what I would discover and whether, under the pressure of making this video, I'd be able to do something that was useful and that made sense. What materials did I like the most and least? I didn't, as I mentioned, I didn't like the stack of coffee cups, but I did like this kind of evocative picture of this young woman on the back. Did my feelings change or stay the same about the things I like most and least? I think I pretty much like my cowboy and I like my portrait of that woman. And I did not like the coffee cup. So I didn't have a lot of feelings that changed about the materials themselves. What was interesting or surprising to me about this activity? I was actually surprised that I did manage to make a bit of a very short, a little bit of a drama, a story about it in just those few minutes. And that was satisfying to me. If my collage was a scene in a story, what was happening before, during, and after it? So I think, I don't know all the details, but what I see in this collage is that this young woman is experiencing some heartache and is feeling pensive about her relationship with this man over here who's looking quite, he looks like he's maybe a bit of a powerful figure and maybe quite traditional. And she's asking herself some questions about him. Is he the one for her? Or are they going to be able to get through whatever problem they're having? Hence the why that I've put up here, and hence the Band-Aid that I have across her heart. Her heart is aching a little bit. And what was happening? So that's what's happening in the moment. What was happening before? Some sort of conflict that led her to reevaluate and to seriously consider this relationship. And where is it going next? What could be happening next? I actually see her somehow turning the other way and maybe taking more time to consider her situation or moving on. That's what comes to mind for me with this picture. So what you would do is have everybody, you've got the first early finisher filling out the form, and then have people do the journaling. Saving time for that is a really good thing to do. You may not always be able to. Sometimes time just interferes, or the group is slower at doing the collage. But if you can, having them actually write out the answers to the journaling questions can really deepen the experience of the collage for them. They'll have some thoughts and feelings that they're experiencing as they're building it, but to have them turn to really consider it and to consider what it means for them to help it cohere a bit more and help it come a bit to the forefront for them, and to give it a title that has some meaning for them. It does deepen the experience, and actually it can be a source of great fun as well. Sometimes people introduce a lot of humor into the story. Teens can particularly do that, which really adds to the bonding in the group and to the sense of positive emotion and joy. So have everybody, if you can, write out their answers. If there's not quite time for that, when the first person finishes, you can suggest to them that they could journal, and you could say what the questions are out loud. At that point, everybody in the group will hear what you're saying. And sometimes what happens then, especially with teens, is that everybody just starts thinking about that and joining in, and you get a nice discussion that doesn't take as long as actually writing out the journal questions would, but accomplishes the same thing in terms of processing the activity. And that is how you do a mystery bag experience for an art therapy intervention. And I hope that you make it your own in some way, thinking about materials that may be especially productive for them. Having some specific materials, but also having a lot of materials that are ambiguous in in their meaning or how they might be used is great. Having something like the Band-Aids as part of the bag is fabulous for people who have really suffered a lot, whether through grief and loss or through trauma. They can really represent both the pain and the repair, the healing that's happening. Having a tactile material like the plasticine is also a good choice. But you'll come up with things that work really well, and you will only learn through trying and failing. That's how I learn, is to make mistakes and then to keep revising it and refining it. So I wish you well.